I am going to be preaching, you can have a seat, I'm going to be preaching part 3 of Inside Out. And I've been really excited to preach this part this week because there's been a few things happening in my life that God's starting to show me and starting to get me excited about with what our church is doing and what we're currently doing as, a community and what we're doing in our community. And so I wanted to pick it up from Matthew 9:9, and it's just a story of Jesus. He's just heading somewhere with his disciples, like he's going for a walk, they're all cruising, and they're going somewhere, and he spots this man. So I'll pick it up in verse 9. It says here, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at a tax collector's booth. Now, I think this is important in part of the context because back then, tax collectors, well, maybe it's still the same now, were not everyone's favorite. They were just like, hey, the tax collector comes along, they're like, hey, man, get away from me. Basically, if you were a tax collector, you were just default sinner back in those days. Like, it was just like, that's just what you think. Because you look at the scriptures and it says, it's like, oh, all the tax collectors and sinners were hanging out together. So people didn't like tax collectors. And Jesus, in this scripture highlights that. He's like, there's a man named Matthew, and he's sitting with this tax collector's booth. But Jesus walks up to this man, and he comes along and he goes, hey, follow me. So there's like no context, there's no like conversation. Jesus walks up and says, hey, follow me. So in verse 9, he said to Matthew, get up and follow me. Then in verse 10, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, can I just pause there for a second? Something had happened between Jesus saying to Matthew, follow me, and then getting into a conversation where Jesus is actually having dinner at Matthew's house. And so I just thought that was interesting. It says here that while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, there was many tax collectors there and sinners, and they had come from all over to eat with him and his disciples. In verse 11, when the Pharisees saw this, and for those that want context on what a Pharisee was a person that upheld the law back in the day. They knew religion, they knew the wrongs and rights, they knew what was right and what was bad, and they knew sacrifice, and they knew all this sort of stuff. The Pharisees came up and they asked the disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? Now, I just want to pause there for a second because I found it interesting that in this context, the Pharisees didn't approach Jesus. They went up to the people he was with and said, hey, this guy you're hanging around, why is he hanging around those guys? Like, what's up with that? I want to kind of like ask you, why are you hanging out with this Jesus guy? It's like they had to they knew Jesus was up to something, but they had to ask the people that were with Jesus, why is the guy you're following doing this? And so the story continues. On hearing this, so Jesus heard this. He heard that people were speaking. He heard that this was going on. Jesus said to him, hey, guys, listen here. I got to tell you something. It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but it is the sick. But go and learn what this means. For I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. Now, if you're wondering why he said that, there was a time before Jesus Christ where we had to sacrifice an animal to take our place for our sins. We'd made a mistake, we had done something wrong, we had done something in our lives, and all of a sudden you have to go get the best animal of the flock and kill them to take your place for your punishment. But I could tell somewhere in this concept of Inside Out that Jesus was starting to reverse the roles. He was starting to change something in society where he's like, hey, listen here, guys. I know you know the rules. I know you understand that I'm hanging out with the worst of the worst and the bad and the sinners and the tax collectors. But my heart desires mercy and not sacrifice. I'm turning the tables here. I'm changing it. I'm a God of mercy, not judgment. I'm a God of mercy and not sacrifice. And so the first thing I wanted to say tonight, or Inside Out Part 3, is that I believe everyone is called. Like everyone. Like you might go, well, you mean the guys that go to church? No. Everyone you know, everyone you're sitting next to right now, everyone that's at your workplace, at your school, everyone you've had grievances with, everything that's gone wrong with other humans, I believe God calls them. I believe he chooses them. He had no context of Matthew, but he says, Matthew, follow me. I believe in this place, no matter what has happened in your life, you are called for greatness. And I know this because God calls us from the inside out. God calls us from the inside before you are qualified on the outside. You know, a few weeks ago, I was talking to someone about this phenomenon that happens to me. Now, we might have to cut this out of the tape because I'm not sure if this can go online, and we'll have to blur it out. But like, sometimes I'm driving and I just appear places. Like, don't judge me just yet. I'm about to explain it and you go, oh my gosh, that happens to me. I'll be driving and then I'll be like, oh, I'm at this roundabout and I forget the last 3 roundabouts I just went through. It's like my brain's somewhere else and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just appeared here. And then I start to backtrack. I'm like, how did I get here? How am I still alive? Is anyone like ever felt that? Sick. We can leave it in the tape then. That's fine. I know the rest of the world's with me on this one. I literally be driving sometimes. I've left my driveway, and I don't know if I made a phone call. I'm doing something that's not like my hands are on the wheel. I'm still looking. And all of a sudden, I'm doing 150 on the highway. I'm like, how did I even get here? Like, what's going on? That's happened, yeah. For some of us, that's happened. For some of us who've seen the blue and red, we know how that story goes. There's been times where I've like been driving and I forgot my own children in the car. I haven't mentioned this to you before, Kirst, but I actually got to the shop doors and I'm like, children. And I go back. They're asleep. Don't judge me. They're asleep from the heat of the car. Is that what you said? No, that's a joke. Cut that out of tape. But there's times where I'm just like doing my thing as a dad or I'm driving, I'm doing this, and I just miss time. Like I just go with the flow and I try to reverse my steps. I try to reverse my driving and I'm like, I'm here at Town Beach. I can't remember what happened between my house and Town Beach, but thank goodness I'm here. And there's this moment where I sober up as a driver. I'm like, okay, here I am. I'm driving. And I was like thinking about this week, and I talked to someone else about this because I'm like checking before I preach this. I'm like, hey, Chris. That was Chris. I was like, Chris, does this ever happen to you? And he's like, all the time. He's like, I even get home and go, how did I get out of the car? Like, it's like we've had these experiences, and I sometimes feel like that's the same with God. Like a lot of us are living life and we're cruising and we're doing our things and sometimes we don't self-observe and we're just going through life. We're just doing our thing. And then all of a sudden, God calls us. He just kind of stops you where you're at. It might be happening right now in this sermon. You might be online. You're sitting in the, don't call me out on this. But sometimes the voice of God just stops you and says, hey, follow me. And then we go, well, God, have you seen my life? Have you seen my mess? Have you seen what I've done? Have you seen what I've seen? God, can you see what I'm into? And God says, I'm calling you from the inside well before you're qualified on the outside. God doesn't look for the qualified on the outside. He looks for those that are willing on the inside. And so this is good news for us as a church, for those that don't know God, because it's not some practice, it's not some code of conduct, it's not this, we'll get our lives together, then God can use me. It's just Jesus saying, hey, follow me with your mess, with your problems, with your imperfect life, where things have gone wrong, and just trust me. And people might say, well, what are you doing hanging around those people? And what are you doing talking to those people? And that don't look too good on the outside. Like Jesus is hanging out with these tax collectors and he's hanging out with these sinners. But the reality was Jesus said, the outside doesn't have to be qualified for me to dwell with the inside. And Jesus will call people in this place online before you have your life together. We often hear this saying that says, it's ridiculous to talk like this. It's like, I'll get better, then go see a doctor. Or I'll get fit, then go to the gym. Jesus said it's not the healthy who I am searching for, but it is the sick. And can I encourage you tonight, believers as well, I'm not just preaching to those that don't believe in God. You hear this voice a lot, and you ignore it. You hear the call of God all the time, and you push it away. You hear God saying, I've got greatness for your life, but you kind of put it to the side because you are ignoring it because you feel like the outside isn't put together. You might think the outside is broken. You might think that it's not perfect. You might think that I've got issues. You might think I've got things I need to fix. So how could God ever use me? And how could God even want to get to know me? I'll tell you why. Because God calls you from the inside, way before the outside is qualified. I'm believing that tonight there's people in this room, people online, and you're hearing this voice. Do not ignore it. God is calling you with all the rubbish, with all the mess. He is calling you into what he wants. Jesus said to Matthew, follow me. There was no other negotiations. Matthew didn't stand up and go, well, God, I've got a few things I've got to work out. He said, okay, what are we doing? And Jesus says, we're having dinner at your house. You know why he said that? This is my revelation on it anyway. I believe Jesus knows you and he knows your story. Like he knows what mess you're in and he knows what you've done and he knows what's going on. But Jesus just wanted to have dinner with Matthew because God knows you and he knows your story. But he wants you to know him. And that's why he seeks us in our broken mess. That's why he calls us in our broken mess. Not because he's like, oh, shocker, humans do bad things. He's like, I know what you do, but I need you to get to know me and why I love you and why I care about you and why I sent my only son for you. Jesus calls us not because we have to hide who we are. He calls us from the inside well and truly before the outside's qualified. And right now there's a bunch of unqualified people all around our city that need to know that God loves them from the inside well and truly before the outside's all put together. You know, this thing I've been learning this last couple of months, it's a new revelation I got, and it's been quite tough to understand. But God's been speaking to me about if I be real, then he can heal. Like, I want to just kind of break this point down before I go to the next thing. But he said to me, he's like, Sam, if you want me to heal your life or you want me to get involved with your life, you have to be real. You have to be real with the people around you. You have to be real with me. You have to be real with your walk with journey. And I'll tell you why I got this revelation. This is for everyone out there, those online. God cannot work with who you pretend to be. He can only work with who you are. You have to go to him as who you are. And I know this is hard to hear because for me, I was trying to process this. I'm like, God, I'm the good husband, right? I'm the good dad. I'm the good everything. Look how good it looks. And then you'll work with me. And God's like, Sam, I want to work with the real you. Yeah. I want to get to know the real you. If you bring me the real you, then I will heal you. And I know this is hard to understand. And I know this is hard to wrap our heads around because we live in such a social media driven world. Like our culture is warped. Like our culture is so social media image driven. Where it's like, what does everyone think about me? What does my Instagram look like? What does my Facebook look like? And we're stuck in this image-driven world. So we bring that image-driven world to Jesus' feet. And we say, Jesus, I am the perfect husband, and I am the perfect, and we start to say, well, I'm trying my best. But God says, hey, I pull that down. I want the real you. I can't work with who you pretend to be. I want to work with the real you. I want to work with the things you got going on. See, our culture at the moment, it's a society where image matters more than heart. People are more focused on whether it looks good than if they actually wanted to do good. In a society where authenticness has been pushed out for unrealistic expectations. You want to ever feel like you're so far from the mark? Compare your worst day to the Instagram lineup when you get up in the morning, because you know the real you. You know what's really going on. You know what's really hard, and we've all got stories about Jones. You know the real you. And then you open up social media, or you watch the TV, or you watch celebrities, and you do this, and you go, oh my gosh. There's no way I could live up to that. There's no way I could be that. There's no way I could be that dad. There's no way I could be that mum. There's no way I could be that person. And God says, that's great, because I'm not asking you to be. Like God's like, I don't need you to have it all together to come into my arms. I don't need you to be perfect for you to come into my space. God says, I will work with the real you. And I believe there's a generation of young people, there's a generation of current people that are saying, you know what, enough's enough with the fake us. And we're going to take the real us to God and say, God, yeah, I might get the husband thing right 5 days out of the 10 or 7, but I can't even do my maths. God, give me grace. But there's going to be times where I say, God, you know what? I could probably be a better dad. And even though the Instagram looks good, I could probably be a better husband. And I could probably be a better preacher. And I could probably be a better pastor. God, I'm coming to you with the real me. And that's when he starts to heal us. He can't heal who you pretend to be. He can only heal who you are. So go to him and say, God, this is who I am. God, I've missed the mark. God, I made mistakes. God, I haven't always got it right. And God goes, I can do something with that. I can heal that. I can work with that. You know, it's the culture we're in. And I'm not against the culture we're in. I'm like, let's, get rid of the culture. I'm saying as Christ followers or those that want to know what it means to follow Christ, in this house and following Jesus, you don't have to pretend to be anything but yourself. And allow God to heal you and change you from the inside out to all he wants you to be. You don't have to put up a show for God like you would for the world. God's not interested in who we pretend to be on the outside. He's fascinated and he's in love with the real you on the inside. You know why he's so fascinated with it? Because everything we pretend to be is not what he created. That's us. He made you. He thought you through. He thought your story through. Like, this is not just for Christians. I'm not just preaching to those that believe. He has a story, and he's thought this out for every single human being on this planet. He has a plan for them. He has a purpose for them, and he has a life for them. And he also knows that when you miss the mark, that he can heal you, he can set you free, and he can change your circumstance. So you don't have to say, God, once I get perfect, then I'll be a Christian. God says, come to me with the real you, and I will heal you. You know, on this topic of inside out, there's a very common thread that happens in my life as a Christ follower, and those that I've talked to that don't even follow God, it still happens to them. It's not something that we're exempt from. But sometimes the outside of our lives break, like things go wrong. And the inside never has an understanding of why. Like we're like, okay, like why has this happened? Why have things gone wrong? And what's the purpose in all this? And what's the reason? And we sometimes if we don't believe, we're like, hey, maybe it's the universe showing me something, or maybe it's a punishment for what I did, like it's karma. And then Christians are like, well, God, this happened to me, so there must be some reason in it. And then some of us don't get the reason, or like we don't understand why so-and-so hurt us, and things just go wrong. And sometimes things bad just happen on the outside. Like it just happens. Like there's stuff in this place where people have been hurt or associated with hurt, and it just disappointed you. It just crushed you. It just hurt you. And I don't know how it all works. And I don't know the answers to this. And sometimes things just go wrong. Like on the outside of our lives, on the things around us, or their health or other things just go wrong. Sometimes things break. Sometimes things go without answers. Sometimes disasters happen. Sometimes I've prayed for things and it hasn't worked out. Sometimes people have hurt me, or I know that people have been hurt by others in unbelievable ways, and they can't see the good in it. But this whole topic of inside out and this whole thing is I realize God doesn't do the miracles on the outside. Like to follow God isn't about the outside, it's about the inside. Yeah. And so God pushes this thing. He says, I know things will go bad. I know things will go wrong. I know things will fall apart. I know things go wrong, because all this stuff going perfect isn't the basis of my faith. The basis of my faith is that Jesus had mercy on me, not that I would have a perfect life. So like Jesus, he goes up to the Pharisees and he says, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. You know, sometimes we think everything has to have a reason or a purpose, or it's sacrifice for my sins. But sometimes things just don't have a reason and they don't make sense right now, and we don't have an answer for them. You know, when I started to realize this, because it's like people go, man, I want to live a good life. I want a good life. I don't think I've met anyone that says they don't want a good life. People want a good life. But sometimes things just go wrong that are out of our control. Sometimes sickness goes wrong and it's out of our control. Sometimes things just go out of our control. And I don't know how it works, and I don't know what God's doing, and I don't have the answers for it. But what I do know is that all Jesus said was, follow me. Jesus didn't promise a perfect life. He didn't promise a polished one. He didn't even promise that everything would be perfect the whole journey. There's only one real thing that Jesus very clearly promised. He said it very clearly. I'm about to read you the verse. And that was rest in the chaos. That was when things go bad, when things fall apart, when things don't work out on the outside, I will give you rest on the inside. And so Jesus speaking in Matthew 11:28, and this is like such an inside kind of verse. Jesus just simply says, this is him speaking, he says, come to me. Like, just listen to this verse, just digest it for a second. Come to me, all you who are weary, who are tired, who are lost, who are sick, who are troubled and burdened, and I will give you rest. You know, rest is such an inside trait. I thought about this week, I'm like, I could be laying in bed in my pajamas, cozy, and in my house, and still not have rest. But from the outside, it looks like I'm chilling. But knowing God's heart, I could be in complete chaos. Things are falling apart, things are going wrong, things are not working out the way I thought. And in that process, and in that what's going on around me, I have complete rest. On the inside of my heart, I'm like, God, I know you have this. I know you've got this. And the past hurts and the things. And the reason why I wanted to touch on this tonight is because I know for a fact that this series is not about us staying in sin. And it's not about us not trying our best to be good, people and to try and live a better life. But things just go wrong. Sickness just happens and things don't always work out the way we want them to. And I want to say this really clear. That is not an indication that God's not in your life. It's not an indication that Jesus is not around because things go wrong. It's not an indication because it's fallen apart that God's removed himself. Because God never promised a perfect life. He never promised a polished one. He promised Jesus Christ have mercy on us. Have love on us, and in the chaos, and in those that are worn out, and in those that are burdened, and in those that are sore, and in those that are sick, I will give you rest. This was an internal thing. This was a bigger picture. He said, follow me, regardless of how it looks on the outside. Follow me regardless of how it feels on the outside. Follow me regardless if you understand it fully or not. Follow me regardless if it's happening good or it's bad or it's ugly on the outside. Because I believe Jesus is changing people from the inside. He multiplies on the inside. He softens hearts from the inside. He strengthens people from the inside. He gives people the ability to forgive from the inside. He allows people to have a different heart for others from the inside. God is an inside kind of God. And it might look bad on the outside. And you might have seen the broken families and marriage and relationships and kids that are just crazy sometimes, or sickness. It might look bad. But Jesus said, I embrace that. Those that are tired, those that are had enough on the outside, I'm going to give you something on the inside. And that's rest. He's giving you rest because He He knows that your soul is more important than your outward appearance. He knows that your heart is more important than the image. But he also knows this, that whether you believe in God or not, whether you don't believe in God or you do or you are, the one thing he does know this, only you know at the end of the day if you have real peace and rest. Only you know that. So Jesus came for that heart. No matter how much money you have, doesn't matter if you have everything or nothing. Doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not. At the end of the day, Jesus knew what was happening on the inside was far greater than the outside. As the band comes. You know, I got married about 8 years ago. And I think about the journey of marriage. It's fun. And I was talking to Kirsty this week. I was like, I'm going to share this part at the end. I was like, going to talk about it. I was like, you know, sometimes we go to like weddings or we've been to weddings or we've got married. It's like, or even just getting into a relationship. And we think it's like, all right, forever, happily ever after. And it's like perfect. Like I think when I was younger, I literally thought that. I was like, once you get married, all your problems go away, right? All the married men are like, don't look at me while you're preaching. But like my marriage, has it been perfect? Absolutely not. Has there been mistakes we've both made? Absolutely. Do we miss the mark? Yes, we do. Have we got it all together? Not all the time. But my love for her on the inside, regardless if she makes mistakes or I make mistakes, our love on the inside is what keeps us together. Because if I loved her for what she did, we probably would have ended that marriage pretty quick. And if she loved me for what I did, then the same thing. It's like, man, you're a human and you make mistakes, I'm out. But the reality is that we love beyond the outside. And we understand what it is to be loved from the inside. And so, when we understand this trait, we understand grace. And we understand why God loves us so much. Because some of us, we want a relationship with God. We really do. But we reserve ourselves or we pull ourselves back, or even online, those that don't believe, you might be like, well, let me get it perfect and then I'll come to church and see what your God's all about. It's like God just says, I love you on the inside. And it might have gone wrong, and there might have been things that have messed up. There might be things that don't look the best. But gosh, I love you. Gosh, I'm fascinated with you. I love you so much, and I'm not put off by the outside. I'm not committed to the outside. I'm committed to your heart. And so following God is similar to like a marriage. You've got to commit. You've got to say, God, I'm going to do this. I'm going to follow you. I'm going to walk with you. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It just means it's just starting the journey. And in that journey, the real you are, the more he can heal. And on that journey, the more we, realize we're called and we've got great things we can do in our lives, the more we'll do. But most importantly, is knowing that wherever we've missed the mark and wherever we've stuffed up on the outside, God doesn't just automatically reject us on the inside. He loves us deeply. He loves us. He loves your neighbors. He loves your friends. He loves your family so deeply on the inside. Amen.